unvariable rights it just fine. We can see Caleb Durward on the right here, and
David Thomas is on the left-hand side. That's a name that sounds familiar, and I think I recognize David here.
Let's see if we can find him.
I'm pretty certain that he's done well in some SCG events prior to this.
I think that you're right, but I can't remember. At this point, one of the things with having so many awesome tournaments is that we really do have a roster of players that have done very well over time here.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh my goodness! Ooh. David Thomas, he won in Kansas City.
Okay, that's why the name sounded familiar.
Not even a month and a half ago.
He was the player who first won with the Delver deck.
Yeah, he was the Delver guy.
Gotcha. All right.
Delver and Tarmogoyf, Snapcaster, oh my. Today, and he also second placed with Dredge almost half a year ago. And he has played Solar Flare in the past, actually. He top 4'd in Kansas City with a Solar Flare deck, and top 8'd in Tennessee, in Nashville, with a Solar Flare deck. So he's no stranger to Solar Flare success.
So players rolling the die right now. Looks like they had a tie, rolling again. So who do you think has the edge here?
I actually think that it's really strongly in Caleb's corner.
Really?
Because the thing is he's got... Oh, wait a second. I thought that the Dismember... Okay, 1 second. 3 Dissipate versus... Yeah, actually, I'm going to say Caleb. I like Dissipate over Liliana, unless David is on the draw and drops Liliana on turn 3. I think the Dissipate are going to take over the match.
Yeah, having more hard counters than your opponent in a mirror like this is definitely a big deal. David has a lot of cards in his deck that are dedicated to his big creature reanimation plan, and that can cause him to fall behind.
We've got turn 3 right now. 2 blue sources from Caleb, total of 3 mana, and David Thomas also with three blue sources. And they both are just going draw, go. And we saw, what was that? He drew 2 cards there for some reason. I guess he thinked at the end of the turn and then drew. There we go. Caleb might not have a 4th land. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's a discard. He does have a Forbidden Alchemy in his hand.
So we saw earlier, and Caleb going for the Forbidden Alchemy here.
And that's going to be countered.
Now we see the mana leak.
Now remember in the last match that we saw this where we did not see that counterspell. And I think this is a really, really critical thing to do. Caleb draws the land out the top anyway. But if you don't see that mana from your opponent, stopping the alchemy to keep them from having the land is a big deal in this kind of matchup.
No, in David's deck, he only has the mana leaks for counter magic, so it can be sometimes a very scarce resource that you can't necessarily afford.
Incredibly scarce.
But it looks like Caleb has peeled 2 land right off the top, so that attempt to keep him off of his mana with mana leak on his alchemy is not proving fruitful. David Thomas is getting his Snapcaster beat down on, and Caleb draws yet another land. Snap you. And
here we go. Meow, 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 meow.
White Sun Zenith, which sadly goes to the yard rather than the deck,
That's
where it
right.
likes to be.
If only he had 3 more in his deck.
And probably a lot less black mana.
He would have to have a lot less black mana. And land on all sides. Snapcaster beating down. Caleb down to 16 life. We see a 5 cast here. I expect Gideon getting a Dissipate out of there. The commanding drop of the Dissipate.
Boom.
Yeah.
Out of here.
Put it down very firmly with his hand there. Out of this matchup, David's deck is definitely the beatdown. He can't afford to wait to the infinite time horizon because Caleb will take over.
Yeah, that's what happens when one player has a high concentration or really any hard counters and one player does not.
We see a Snapcaster perhaps on Kitty Cats.
Yeah.
Meow, 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 meow.
So what happens here? Does it go to the deck or does it remove?
Removed. Out of there. And here we have 2 cats.
Oh,
whoa. Stop that play there. Get the judge to stop that.
So
that White Sun Zenith does not get shuffled in. It's being flashed back. I've played it infinite times on Moto.
As Caleb freezes. Looks like, yeah. So we
Okay.
communicated this to the judges that this is apparently not how this is
Yeah.
supposed to
Now,
work.
one of the things about this, you would think that there would be a choice, but because of the way that flashback works, flashback, the cost of the card is to remove it from the game.
Ah, gotcha. So part of the resolution of the ability of White Sun Zenith is to shuffle it into your deck. So
Now, yeah, White Sun Zenith is a card I've played with a lot in the last many months.
kind of funny that we were like, so what happens here then? Oh no, the wrong thing. Stop.
Okay, now we have 6 power here for Caleb. Caleb, switching the gears around. David is on a 4-turn clock. That Snapcaster actually still just chasing the race, saying, I don't think you're going to be able to stop this next thing I'm going to do. He's got a mana leak to be able to control it. Day of Judgment, and wow, Caleb's willing to fight over the Day of Judgment. I would not fight over this. Unless he's got a handful of goodness, I would not fight over that day.
He's snap dissipating. He wants to go beat downs.
Wow.
And it's out of there. Well, Caleb is attacking for 8 next turn?
Yep. 6, then 8 puts David at 6. Well, I mean, actually, maybe that's okay. He's got
David's in a pretty rough spot now.
He's got 6 mana left. Okay, the math actually works out, so that's not terrible. There's a 1-turn clock now for David to be able to be in this game.
Looks like David has, I believe that's Elish Norn in his hand.
Elish Norn is a very expensive spell.
Yes, it is. I believe I saw Mana Leak in Caleb's hand. So, Oblivion Ring,
That
killing
actually,
a cat.
that actually goes a long way towards blunting the damage. I mean, if he's got like a Doomblade in his hand or anything like that, then he's on a 3-turn clock.
It looks like Caleb has Oblivion Ring of his own.
Oh boy, that's a rough one.
So, Caleb is this still the...
This is still the main phase.
So David is debating, I wonder what.
I think he's considering, he's only got 6 mana available, is that correct? Maybe just cast, he's got a Doomblade in his hand. There is a Doomblade there.
Nope.
Sun Titan.
Sun Titan.
Into the leak, I think.
I don't know that I would... Yeah.
I don't like that play.
I would not do that.
I don't like that play at all.
He's actually just dead now.
He's
just going to get Mana Leak, then Oblivion Ring.
And then
Yeah,
here's
and
my
there it is.
O-Ring.
So yeah, I think if I were David, I would have waited and just said go, and then tried to cast my Sun Titan the following turn when I could pay for Mana Leak.
Actually, I would say I would wait, and then on the following turn cast Elish Norn.
Or I would have cast Sun Titan up front rather than casting the Oblivion Ring.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think he had an Elish Norn in his hand, I think.
Did he?
Maybe.
I think I saw an Elish one. I may have mistaken Sun Titan for Elish.
I was trusting on your eyesight,
Yeah.
but if he did not...
Getting old, man. Getting old.
Okay, so David Thomas, his board cards, Nihil Spellbomb is not terrible against Snapcasters.
And 2 Dissipate.
2 Dissipate is great, and I actually think Batterskull is actually quite powerful in this fight.
Okay.
Basically because you've got so few cards that actually matter, having a card that can be very resilient against like hate, like Oblivion Rings, things like that, is actually effective.
Caleb has, it looks like...
Blue Sun Zenith is going to be
Blue Sun
huge.
Zenith, a pair of Nihil Spellbombs, which are much more powerful than his opponent's
Yes.
Nihil Spellbombs, as David Thomas is on much more of a Reanimator plan.
Oh, I see another crazy good
Jace
card.
Memory Adept.
Yep.
Negate and Volition.
Okay, Caleb starts out, I think, in the driver's seat, and I think what happens here is he just basically grabs his opponent and throttles him after sideboard.
Yeah, his deck looks like it is, as we saw, pretty well set up for the first game with a lot more ability to fight those long game fights.
Yeah.
And after sideboarding brings in a lot of powerful cards.
I mean, I'd be willing to bet that the matchup game 1 is about 60 to 65% Caleb, and
You're not allowed to bet on Magic.
Oh, good point. And game 2, 3, I bet you he goes up to 70, 75%. And with those kinds of numbers, and obviously I'm just kind of conjecturing there, but if that was even like remotely accurate, what would we be talking about? I said 60 and 70. Give me half a second and I'll tell you.
Uh-oh, doing some math.
Yeah, math is hard. The math says... As soon as I open up my little file, that just does it for me. Meanwhile, not only I think does Caleb have the advantage just in terms of his main and sideboard, but being up game 1 is such a huge deal. 60 and then 70. That would put it as a 75% matchup if 60 and 70 were the numbers.
That's and being up game 1.
Yep.
Even better.
Yep.
That is something that I think a lot of people don't really recognize is just how much more important sideboarded games are than game 1.
Oh, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And actually, once you make that realization about how much more important sideboarded games are, when you're in playtest groups and you discover that they are not doing sideboarded games, it can be pretty maddening.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're like, okay, yeah, you're right. My deck only wins 40% against that deck until we sideboard.
Yep. It's definitely a huge deal to understand that you play twice as many sideboard games as you do main deck games over the course of a tournament, assuming you're magically going to 3 games.
Yeah, let's do a thought experiment here. You have a 30% chance to win game 1. How good does your sideboarder game have to do to make it a 50% matchup? Only 30% to win game 1. How good do you have to be in game 2, 3?
It's like a little over 60.
60.
Yeah.
60 puts you over 50% of the matchup.
So it's definitely the amount of impact that sideboard cards can have, and this is when people talk about how important having a sideboard plan, having a well thought out sideboard structure is. It's even more important than most people realize.
Absolutely.
Even when they think it's important.
I mean, there's a reason that I did the math one day and just saved the sheet so I could just always look at it if I needed to figure out what I was doing when it comes to how much do I need to work to try to make this matchup work, or is it even worth it?
Right.
Because another thing to do sometimes with a bad matchup is abandon ship and just say, well, if I play against it, that's it. That's fine.
Yeah, I remember back in 2000, the World Championships.
That was a good year.
When John Finkel won and Bob Maher took second
Yes.
place. They did so with a Tinker deck that our group worked very hard on, that a lot of people dismiss Tinker as a viable deck because of the popularity of Replenish. And it was actually a sideboarding strategy that we discovered that involved Rising Waters, because
nice.
The general plan of the Tinker deck against control decks was to lock them down as Mistress Helix, but the frantic searches from the Replenish deck could often just counteract that.
Yeah.
But if you boarded in Rising Waters, you're able to lock down and annuls and miscalculations. They're all in your deck for various other reasons as well. You're able to sufficiently improve the matchup, which was virtually unwinnable in game 1, to actually be extremely advantageous in
Absolutely.
in 3 games.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the decks I was working on for this World season, it had about a 33% matchup for game 1, but after game sideboarding, you went up to 66%, and that actually is a 1 match.
Yeah, that's huge.
They have finally, they're still shuffling. Caleb going back to his sideboard. Now, one of the things I actually really like doing in matches is I really like having my little timer there with the stopwatch feature and doing the lap button when we start sideboarding, because I learned a long time ago at a Grand Prix that people can take a lot longer than 3 minutes sideboarding if you don't police it. And this has definitely been more than 3 minutes sideboarding.
They're taking their time.
I mean, you have 3 minutes to sideboard and present. That's actually not that long of a time if you think about it.